Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 283rd episode of the Simple Sophisticate. In today's episode, we're going to talk about work and how to improve our work experience. So many of our jobs have been completely upended or entirely changed as to where we work, how we work, if we're working. That may change for a lot of us, as we know, as we go forward. And it's also given us an opportunity to reflect on what we miss, what we don't miss, and how we can change that moving forward. So today I'm going to share with you 7 ideas for improving your approach to working and thus improve your experience and the overall. As well, this week's Petite plaisir is a lovely nibble. I am enjoying the British Week that we celebrated a couple weeks ago. But British Week goes on in my home year round with the tea that I drink, with the treats that I nibble on, with all sorts of other things, the shows I watch, the books I read, so much. And so today I'm going to bring to you a nibble that I've just recently discovered, and I think you will enjoy it as well. And I'll show you where you can get it if you are interested. But that'll be at the end of today's episode. Let's get into our topic: 7 ideas for improving your approach to work and thus improving your experience and the outcome. I want to begin with a quote from one of the handful of books that inspired me for today's episode. And it's from the book called Do Nothing: How to Break Away from Overworking, Overdoing, and Underliving by Celeste Headley. She writes, "To embrace leisure, we don't have to let go of progress. Our constant pushing is now impeding our progress. We work best when we allow for flexibility in our habits. We can and must stop treating ourselves like machines that can be driven and pumped and amped. Instead of limiting and constraining our essential natures, we can celebrate our humanness at work and in idleness. We can better understand our own natures and abilities. We can lean in not to our work, but to our inherent gifts." End quote. For the past 10 weeks, I have had the good fortune to go to work with both of my dogs. Why? Because I have been working from home, like so many of you. I am able to take them for a short walk about the neighborhood before I step into my office and remote classroom that is in my house, then take a break around 10:30 as we sit on the garden porch, soaking in some sunshine and thinking about what I might want to enjoy for lunch in a few hours' time. Lunch is leisurely because I can cook it, savor it, not be rushed to eat it. And our afternoon outing, about 70 to 90 minutes of work after lunch, is to the mailbox and about the neighborhood, sometimes chatting with some of the neighbors. Returning to the office, if need be, to tie up loose ends, checking my work email one more time, because I've chosen to only check my email now 3 times a day from my school, as I am now checking my school email only 3 times a day. When the day concludes, I'm not exhausted, and I feel productive. Admittedly, this scenario is due to an unwanted global occurrence, and I miss my in-person connections with my students and colleagues. But what I do not miss is the excessive expectation to always be checking my email, regularly being interrupted so that I lose my focus, my students' focus, and the requirement for a long, inflexible workday, meaning not healthy breaks, a constant expectation of being on all the time, and being rewarded for giving more beyond the workday, even if it reduces the quality of my home life and personal relationships. I share that list not to complain directly about a system that surrounds so many of us, but just trying to be honest about the reality of why I was quietly thankful to have the time at home these past 10 weeks to catch my breath. I did my best to examine this why, and while the emotional toll for those of us fortunate enough not to have our health and livelihoods taken away during this time. That emotional toll was unhealthy and exhausting, I will admit. After the 6 or 8 week mark, I was emotionally like, oh, and I was thinking, why? And then it's like, oh, this is not a normal situation. Overall, though, I found great refuge and restoration this spring while I was staying at home. And I found a schedule that worked for me as I shared online through previous posts and on Instagram, as I continued to remotely teach as well as blog, and then just be home. I had time to explore those feelings. I had time to figure out what was working. I wasn't rushed. I wasn't bombarded. I could take the breaks when my body and mind needed them. I also, as I just shared at the top of this episode, found much more time to read books that have been patiently sitting in my shopping cart, and a handful of those books furthered my exploration into how exactly to improve this working environment when we begin to step back into the workplace. I have 7 ideas I'd like to share with you today. Number 1, understand the history of the current work culture. Celeste Healy shares, quote, "We are investing our time and energy and hard-earned money in things we think will make us more efficient, but those things end up wasting our time, exhausting us, and stressing us out without bringing us closer to our goals." Now, she just released this book this spring, obviously not knowing what was going to be happening this spring, but it was quite serendipitous, I found, the timing of its release, and I was excited to read this book and highly recommend it. She's a journalist and a best-selling author, and she reminds readers in her new book called Do Nothing, How to Break Away from Overworking, Overdoing, and Underliving, that, quote, "our working habits changed dramatically a little more than 2 centuries ago," end quote. This is also known as the time when the Industrial Revolution began. Obviously, we know it began in Britain, but it spread throughout the world, and the United States definitely was part of that. And she argues that this was largely not for the better, especially to the humans, but to so many different things. But she's focusing on the human factor. In fact, humans came to be seen as being capable of producing regularly and steadfastly with minimal breaks, much like a machine. Humans are not machines. Our ability to be productive and creative and resilient comes from adequate and regular and in equal measure amounts rest to that of the amount of time we work. No wonder we're exhausted. So number 1, I think it really is important that we understand where this all began. This hasn't been the way it's always been. If someone tells you that, they're wrong. Go tell them to study history. It began with the Industrial Revolution. Now, she makes a valid point, and I think it's important to say this. It's not as though pre-Industrial Revolution things were wonderful for everybody. And she's not talking about slavery. She's not talking about indentured servitude. She's talking about workers who were getting paid fairly, unfairly. We know, if you know your Industrial Revolution history, that it was not a wonderful place to be a worker for the most part. But it still goes on in some form or fashion. And it used to be that we had a lot of artisan craftsmen who were valued and paid for their unique abilities and the time they put in. And thus we had more appreciation of the things that we valued and brought into our homes instead of having more things. There's so many caveats to all this, and I encourage you to explore what she shares in the book. This is just a taste. So number 1 is to understand the history of the current work culture. Number 2, enable the mind to think well so that you can respond compassionately. Often we are reacting instead of responding to situations in life that arise unexpectedly or unwantingly. At the time, in that moment, we are not aware that we are reacting rather than responding because either we have always behaved in this way or because we do not know or have not been taught a better way. Dr. Sylvia Bornstein speaks about equanimity, and as it pertains to the mind, equanimity is, quote, "the capacity of the mind to hold a clear view of whatever is happening, both externally and internally, as well as the ability of the mind to accommodate passion without losing its balance. It's the mind that sees clearly, that meets experience with cordial intent. Because it remains steady and thus unconfused, it is able to correctly assess the situation it meets," end quote. How then do we become these clear thinkers that she's talking about? Well, here's some ideas. We acknowledge we do not know everything, and we take a step back and we ask helpful questions with a calm tone. We choose to educate ourselves, seeking out experts in the fields that we wish to learn more about, whether that's in the form of a book or audio or video or conversation with these individuals. We become comfortable with not having a concrete and absolute response immediately ready or at all, and acknowledging the gray area, the vast gray area in nearly every situation that presents itself. This includes a good night's sleep, regularly living at a slower pace with regards to our schedules, our days and weeks, and a cultivation of environments that enable us to lower our stress levels and feel safe and comfortable. I want to share a quote from Dr. Sylvia Bornstein. She writes, "And because we are humans and have empathy built into our brain structure, when we are touched by what we encounter and when our minds are balanced, we respond with benevolence." Now, Sylvia Bornstein is a licensed psychiatrist, and she's also the author of Happiness is an Inside Job, another book I've read, and I recommend if you want to explore how we are responsible for our own happiness, and really it's all about the mind, and she does a good job of exploring that. I've also shared a link to a podcast, episode 145, where I delineate between what responding looks like and what reacting looks like and what the difference is. We want to choose to respond, not react, and I dive deeply into that if that's something you're curious about. That's episode 145. So number 2 is we need to enable the mind to think well so we can respond compassionately. Number 3 is to let go of the busy mentality. We've talked about this concept quite a bit on this podcast and the blog. But when we reduce the constant go, go, go mentality, we give our lives breath. And figuratively speaking, because we give our lives a breath, we give our lives oxygen to live better and thus to improve the quality of our lives. Letting go of busy feeds a cycle of life improvement because as you are letting go of busy, you are improving your decision-making skills, reducing the unnecessary stress, and constantly cultivating the life you want to live, rather than creating more problems, more headaches, and less time to adequately address and handle those problems, headaches that you've created. Interestingly enough, studies have actually shown that we may actually think we are busier than we actually are. But it is the delusion of busyness that is the cause for our mind to feel harried and thus our decision-making abilities to suffer. For example, if you feel pressed for time, so it's a feeling, you feel pressed for time. In your mind, you think you do not have enough time. This perception can lead you to making bad choices about how you spend your time. Conversely, if you feel you have time to spare, a study revealed that people feel healthier and happier. So much of the quality of our lives is in our minds. If we can harness this awesome tool of our mind, we will improve our approach to living. In episode 115, I dive into the 8 benefits of banishing busy. So if you want to explore more benefits, I've just talked about 1 there with regards to decision making. I also share 7 more in the episode 115 if you're curious. So that's number 3. Now, before I get to the remaining 4 ideas, I want to introduce you to this week's sponsor. June is Pride Month, and while this year's celebrations may be a little different than usual, there are still ways we can come together to support the LGBTQ plus community. One way is with Bombas' new Pride collection. These colorful socks bring more love, compassion, and comfort into the world because these socks give back to those experiencing homelessness in the LGBTQ plus community. Now, I have had the opportunity to receive these colorful socks, and they just made me smile, and they're also extremely comfortable, as are all the Bombas socks that I've had the opportunity to wear and enjoy. For every pair of Pride socks you buy, Bombas will donate a pair to someone in need in the LGBTQ plus community through the Ally Coalition. Bombas works year-round with the Ally Coalition, an organization that uses music to illuminate the systematic inequalities facing the LGBTQ plus community, like homelessness. Did you know that the LGBTQ plus community is more at risk of experiencing homelessness? 1 in 10 young adults in the LGBTQ plus community will experience it, according to a study by the Voices of Youth Count. Now, the Bombas Pride collection comes in 6 colorful styles. My favorite were the ankle socks that have a leopard pride print on them with all different rainbow colors and a rainbow ring around the ankle, but they have calf socks They have no-show socks. They have black socks, solid colors of all the different rainbow colors. Check those out at bombas.com and discover socks that are made with extra long staple cotton, the softest, most breathable cotton in the world. Honestly, these are my favorite socks. I wear them walking. I wear them constantly. And they're built with a cushioned footbed that creates a layer of comfort between you and your shoes without adding any bulk. Bombas socks provide support in places you didn't even know you needed, like your arches. Each sock is built with a special arch hugging system that's supportive but not too tight. Have you ever noticed that annoying toe seam most socks have? Well, Bombas has gotten rid of it. Just smooth sailing all the way across the top of your foot. Pride is usually a time where we can all come together. But because many Pride events were canceled this year, it's more important than ever to find new ways to show support and give back to the community. As a Simple Sophisticate listener, you can give back by going to bombas.com/sophisticate today to shop the Pride collection and get 20% off your first order. That's Bombas, BOMBAS.com/sophisticate. Number 4 is quality productivity is not a result of excessive time given. Quality over quantity, rearing its head again. I love it. Here's a quote from Celeste Headley. If you silence your phone, close your inbox, and really focus on getting a report done, research shows you'll finish 40% faster, have fewer errors, and have plenty of time to take a short walk around the building and let your brain relax. Interesting. And I think it is important to point these facts out and these studies out, because when we realize that more does not produce more, then we can present this to our boss, our leader, our administrator, or if we are the administrator, the boss, or the whoever that makes these decisions, we can say, whoa, wait a second. I want better quality work. This is a way I can do it. Well, why wouldn't I? Studies that were done decades ago have proven this out as well. More time does not equate to more output, and certainly not a quality output. In 1951, researchers at the Illinois Institute of Technology discovered that people who put in excessive hours were the least productive of all. The most productive were the workers who worked 2 to 5 hours a day, so a 10 to 20-hour work week. A hospital attempted to improve the working conditions for their workers by reducing their hours to 6 hours a day and no more than 30 hours a week. The hospital was prepared to hire extra workers to make up for the loss of productivity. But you know what happened? And it was reported in the New York Times, quote, the unit performed 20% more operations, generating additional business from treatments that would have gone to other hospitals, end quote. Quality over quantity demonstrates it is worth investing in. And in this case, it surpassed even that of the hopeful that it would simply be equitable in output. It produced even more output, more quality results. Seems impossible, but it actually can be done. So number 4 is quality productivity is not a result of excessive time given. Number 5, allow yourself to focus on a single task entirely and without disruption. Simply turn off the notifications. If you work at a job that expects you to constantly respond to emails, broach the topic of productivity, as studies have demonstrated if we cannot give ourselves fully to a task, we cannot do our best work. What this means for me at home is that I have been checking my school emails, as I said at the top of this episode, 3 times a day during the school day, when the day begins, at noon, and then at the end of the day. If this will be a shift for those expecting to hear from you, perhaps sending an automated response for the first month or 2 would be helpful, or just put it in your footer so that people can know when to expect to hear from you and how frequently you check your email so that they're not expecting an immediate response and should not worry when they do not receive one. I think it's important to take advantage of these little things that we have control over for the most part. I mean, every business is unique. And so I think it's important that we be honest with ourselves. Number 1, I was realizing, why are you having your notifications on? You're at home, for goodness sakes. And even if you're at home, my administrator does not expect me to be checking my email while I'm teaching. And I appreciate that about the school district for that. If there is a vital piece of information that we need to read, they will come on the intercom and let us know. And that has maybe happened 2 or 3 times during the school year, thankfully. But again, this is a conversation to have with yourself, be honest. But then if you need to, have a conversation with your boss or your administrator. Number 6, invest in leisure. Research shows employees who feel more detached from their jobs during their time at home are emotionally healthier and more satisfied with their lives. They're less likely to feel emotionally exhausted, and they report getting better sleep. This is from Celeste Headley in her book, Do Nothing. Leisure time is separate from free time or spare time, as Headley defines it. Spare time is the time we find in between the work we do for our income. Leisure time is entirely separate from work. As she describes it, leisure time is unpolluted by work. No emails, no work calls, not worrying about how your activity at the moment might impact your work life. Speaking for myself, while I and many other educators have been at home these past 10 weeks, it has not been leisure time during the work week. I am still, if I am not teaching online, checking my work emails, responding to expectations, grading papers, and aware of my actions during the school day. My leisure time begins on the weekend, after the school day ends each workday, and will fully begin when our summer holiday starts later this week. The mind behaves differently when we are on leisure time, and it is imperative that we regularly welcome it into our daily lives. Each of us will do it differently during the work week and weekend, and perhaps even on our holidays, but we do need to make sure we have leisure time in our life to savor and enjoy. It will make a tremendous difference in the quality of your life. So that's number 6, invest in leisure. Number 7, give your mind space to become clear. Quote, just take one breath and another with as much attention in every way as you can. The confusion will sort itself out. Inclined in the right direction, the mind takes care of itself. This is from Sylvia Bornstein. And we'll talk about this quote a little bit with regards to inclined in the right direction. I think that is important. So the untrained mind can be a weapon of destruction to ourselves and to others. A trained mind, one that is understood, that is strengthened to think well, critically examine, and refrain from rash assumptions due to lack of emotional intelligent understanding, is an artist's prized possession. And you can be an artist. All of us can. However, it is a choice to become a student of our mind. Bornstein writes, quote, I do not think the mind needs lots of instruction, but I do think it needs to be encouraged and continually inspired. End quote. I love this quote because feeding your mind is so important, and feeding it well is how we do that so that we have a mind that works for us. Be conscious of what is presented to your mind. Limit your social media. Be aware of the news and how much you take in. Observe how you feel around certain people, the books you read, the videos and shows on television you watch. All of these things are things that feed your mind. Choose to feed it with what you are curious about. Delight in learning something new, and do not feel guilty for not knowing what the zeitgeist believes is most popular or most noteworthy of that particular moment. Give your mind space to have clarity. And when it has clarity regularly, it will be your best friend. In episode 20, I talk about how to be the master of your mind. And I also dive deeper into my second book about this topic as well, with regards to the skills versus the strengths that we all have in chapters 8 and 9. So if you're really curious about how to understand what it is your mind can do and how to do that and understand it, that would be a great place to start. The podcast, episode 20, and then the book, chapters 8 and 9. So that's number 7. That wraps up the 7 ideas to improve your workspace and thus improve your working experience and the outcome. So how can we institute these needed changes if research has repeatedly demonstrated the need to observe that we are human beings, not machines? Well, as I briefly mentioned earlier, we need leaders who are well educated with the resources that demonstrate convincingly that the quality of work will not diminish and likely will increase when we see our employees as human beings. Yes, it is a culture shift, and it will take time, but it takes courage and strong, patient leadership to clearly communicate the benefit to the worker first, knowing that the company, the department, the school, our futures will be all the better. And even if you are not in a position of leadership at the moment, communicate with your leadership body, build a consensus amongst your coworkers. Schedules and approaches change with data, trusted experts, and informing the public, and as well as those it will directly affect, as well as indirectly. Now is actually a wonderful time to make some changes that we want to see. As I've mentioned in previous episodes or podcasts, during this time at home, our feathers have been ruffled. Now we can see what we can do, what we don't have to do, or what we no longer need to do. We can also see how to change and add or do something different to make it better. If nothing else, you can start at home by setting boundaries on your work and home life, cultivate leisure time, practice the strengthening of your mind, and begin to see your being settle, relax, and enjoy your life far more. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. I do recommend reading the books that I mentioned today, and those are both linked on the show notes. You can visit the show notes and this entire discussion on the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 283. And I'll be back with this week's delicious Petit Plaisir. So this week's Petit Plaisir is a shortbread cookie. Oh, it's so good. So I happened to just unexpectedly be introduced to Shortbread House of Edinburgh's Sicilian Lemon Biscuit. Oh, it is gone. I received it last week with the delivery of a new novel that was just released called The Jane Austen Society. Now I'm reading that novel right now. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but I'm not done. So I didn't want to include it as a petit pleasure yet, but it is something that so far I am highly enjoying. And I was hoping to have it be part of British Week, but it was delayed a little bit and just arrived last week. Well, in their press box were these Sicilian lemon biscuits. They were from Edinburgh. And they're scrumptious. I have dunked them in my tea as I'm sipping my now Twinings tea. I'm now a total fan of Twinings tea. I've never had it before. I have a ton in my cupboard now, and I will be continually having it stocked and ready. That is delicious as well. Simple, inexpensive, and just quality tea. So I've linked, so I had to go online. I was like, where am I going to get more of these biscuits? Because I'm going to go through these quickly. And I did. I went through them in about a week. And there's about 6 or 7 of them. I think 8, maybe 8, no more than 8 biscuits in each of the tins. And they're only about $10 or $11 the tins, but they're not easy to find. So if you're in the UK, you can find them no problem. And I've linked to the direct website of Shortbread House of Edinburgh. If you're in the States, I found them on Chelsea Market Baskets, and you can buy not just the Sicilian lemon biscuits, but all the different varietals. So you can check those all out if you like shortbread. And like I said, these are wonderful for you to have for yourself. These are wonderful to have on hand for company when they stop by for tea. Also great stocking stuffers or gifts. Not that expensive, but truly, truly delicious. They will melt in your mouth. And while I like the lemon biscuit, I've always been a fan of citrus. It's just enough. It's not too much. It's just that little pop of citrus, buttery cookie that just crumbles in your mouth, and just, you're going to love it. Well, I shouldn't say that. If you love those ingredients, you're going to love it. They do a wonderful job. They definitely know what they're doing. Here is a video from the house, the Shortbread House of Edinburgh, and what the history of the shortbread cookie is. Quite interesting, and a lovely video to watch if you have the opportunity. I'll leave it on the show notes.
From the ancient and beautiful landscapes of Scotland come the foods and drinks for which the country has become famous. Of these, none is more traditional than shortbread. It was first made in the 16th century and eaten on special occasions such as New Year. By Victorian times, jealously guarded family recipes were being passed from generation to generation. In Edinburgh, farmer's daughter Anna Wilson put her handmade family recipe into production. The thriving business was taken on by Anthony Lang, a descendant of the baking family that invented the digestive biscuit, and made cakes for royal occasions. Shortbread house biscuits are still handmade in the traditional manner, using only the finest ingredients. Wherever possible, sourced locally. Every stage of the process is done by hand, from weighing the ingredients to cutting the biscuits and checking that each batch is perfectly cooked. The result is baking of unrivaled quality, which has won many awards. Biscuits are baked to order, ensuring the customer receives them as fresh as possible. The extensive range includes plain and flavoured shortbread in a variety of sizes, as well as sweet oat biscuits and Dundee cakes. They're packaged in a beautifully designed selection of boxes and tins. Shortbread house baking is served at some of the world's best hotels and sold in the finest shops. Enjoyed everywhere from boardrooms to tea tables. Shortbread House of Edinburgh biscuits are a taste of perfection, continuing a great Scottish tradition.
As I said, these are a lovely little simple luxury, and it will definitely keep British Week going throughout the year if you enjoy sipping your tea with a traditional biscuit. So that is the Sicilian lemon biscuit from Shortbread House of Edinburgh. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petite Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each episode where I'll recommend a book, a film, a show, or a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. The links to both of those websites are on the show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 283. And I want to thank you for tuning in today. I so hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bonne journée. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, visit the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up my latest book, Living the Simply Luxurious Life, Making Your Everydays Extraordinary and Discovering Your Best Self, now available on Audible and wherever audiobooks are sold, as well as in paperback and ebook versions. You can also pick up my first book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide, which is also available in paperback, ebook, and as an audiobook as well. To stay caught up on the most recent episodes of the podcast, blog posts, the cooking show, and receive exclusive news as well as an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart your weekend, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's free weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or cup of morning coffee. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée!